Now, today on Secure the Continent, we will be looking at the Ethiopian truce and the prospects of the Tigrayan ceasefire bringing long-term peace. This 17-month war waged by the government against the Tigray People's Liberation Front, combined with the blockade, has left to a severe humanitarian crisis. Now, Ethiopia's government has declared an immediate humanitarian truce with rebel Tigrayan forces to allow aid into the besieged northern region, where millions are on the brink of starvation. We have more details for you in this package.
In Africa's second most populated country and one of the continent's most diverse nations, the military has been at loggerheads with one of its most significant ethnic divisions. For 16 months, the government's controlled Ethiopian National Defense Forces and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Force have been fighting for control of the Tigray region, officially the Tigray National Regional State, the northernmost regional state in Ethiopia. At least 500 people have reportedly died as a result of starvation and violence in Tigray. The conflict and a lack of healthcare and food has ripped the region apart and made it a shadow of its old powerful self. With Ethiopia joined by Eritrea and the Oromo Defense Forces also playing a part in the war, many parties have been inflicted in how long the conflict has been drawn out. Those involved have been accused of human rights violations as they block food and medical supplies from getting to the victims most affected on both sides of the conflict. But now, a ray of hope seems to be coming through the cloud of war and violence. A truce between the main parties could be the first sign of an easing of tensions in the region. Will both parties play ball? Will the Ethiopian National Defense Force and the Tigrayan People's Liberation Force keep to the terms of the agreement? Is this the beginning of lasting peace for Tigray and Ethiopia?
Now, joining me to discuss this ceasefire and more are Professor Kjetil Tronvoll, a professor of peace and conflict at Oslo University College and director of Oslo Analytica. Also joining is Teklai Gebremichael, a writer and Tigrayan activist. And finally, we have Naty, Yifru, political analyst and Amhara national. Gentlemen, a warm welcome to you all, and thanks for joining us and Secure the Continent.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to start with Naty. Since the war broke out in northern Ethiopia in November 2020, thousands have died and millions remain displaced as the conflict has expanded from Tigray to the neighboring regions of Amhara and Afar. What is the genesis of this conflict that began in November 2020 in Tigray? Who started this and who is the aggressor?
This conflict has started in November 4th, 2020. It has actually started a little bit before then. The Abiy government, the Ethiopian government, has been, they weren't even very discreet about it. They were warning that they will be invading Tigray. They were giving a lot of signals, a lot of signs, even just a few weeks before the war started. They have invited Isaias Afwerki and showing him, a lot of military equipment. That's a signal. Even before then, there were a lot of dog whistles about Tigrayans to have them isolated ethnically, just to make them feel unwelcome. Not only, I'm not talking about the elites, I'm not talking about political enemies of the government, I'm talking about people. By dog whistling, by isolating the people to make them feel that they live in a country that doesn't welcome them, and they have been doing that repeatedly. So I wouldn't say that the war has started on November 4th. Having said that, on that day, it does look like that Isaias Afwerki, the Eritrean leader, and Abiy Ahmed decided when the world attention was focusing on presidential election here in the United States, they decided to do a quick invasion of Tigray. The official reason that they have given is soldiers have been attacked, and that's the
Ethiopian
reason why
army base, yes.
It's been started. and that is becoming a really ridiculous story every day, particularly since a lot of facts are coming out since then. But yeah, they have been preparing for it, and I personally don't believe that they have that this is a spontaneous, war that's been started on Tigray. And I also would like to add that it's not on Tigray. Again, the political enemies against the political enemies of Abiy Ahmed or the federal government in Tigray. This is decisively by design the war that's declared on the people of Tigray, not on TPLF or on the government of Tigray.
Thank you, Naty. I would like to bring in Professor Tronvoll here. The government, led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, said the ceasefire declared last Thursday could pave the way for the resolution of the conflict in northern Ethiopia without further bloodshed. An analyst in the country expressed hopes that if it holds, the deal may lead to a diplomatic resolution. What do you make of the surprise announcement of an indefinite humanitarian truce by the Ethiopian government?
Well, it wasn't such a surprise. We have known that there have been talks or indirect talks between Mekele and Addis for some time in order to try to negotiate a ceasefire agreement. That did not happen for various reasons, because then suddenly the Addis Ababa government declared a unilateral truce, which was rather quickly reciprocated by Mekele, also declaring a truce. However, both sides in the declaration also put some preconditions into the truce for it to be effective. Basically, that the Tigrayan forces should pull out of Afar regional state. That was said by the Addis Ababa government. And Mekele said that, well, we will pull out if aid is delivered on the ground, or when aid is delivered on the ground. That is the true test of the truce and the genuinity of the truce. As you said, it was declared last week, 7 days ago. Still, no lorries with humanitarian aid has reached Mekele or Tigray. It is no flow unimpeded of the humanitarian aid as the truce were supposed to facilitate.
Now, Prof, what is preventing this aid from getting to Mekele, to this very much needed humanitarian aid?
It's desperately needed across the region. So far, it has been a bottleneck in Afar regional state. It is one route which are partly open on the ground, and that's through the Afar regional state. And the local government in Afar and regional militia has stopped the attempts to drive the trucks to Tigray. The Afar government and also partly Ethiopian government blame Tigrayan forces of creating instability where the road traverses into Tigray. That has been rejected by Mekele. And Mekele claims that the Afar regional government and Afar militia are holding the trucks hostage, so to say. And which is also confirmed by the UN agencies involved here. There are bottlenecks on the Afar side, and the federal government has so far not enforced the trucks to drive, so to say, to protect them from Afar militia. There are rumors or the indications that actually this afternoon, there was a new attempt of 30 lorries to go from Semera, the Afar regional capital, to Tigray, but it's not yet confirmed whether or not they have managed to cross into Tigray.
Now, Professor Tronvoll, before I move to Teklai, shouldn't the central government in Addis have seen this sort of situation, that because much needed aid is going to pass through a far territory, and the regional government there is not exactly friendly towards Mekele. Shouldn't they have emphasized the situation and consulted them before declaring a unilateral ceasefire?
Obviously, if this was a clear sailing, so to say, and a smooth terrain. But you have to understand that Abiy Ahmed, he is relying upon support from both the Amhara regional government and the Afar regional government to run the country, basically, and also other component parts of Ethiopia. He doesn't have the power to enforce his will on the ground, either in Amhara or in Afar. He must rely on the collaboration and cooperation of local authorities. Keep in mind that there are a number of roads leading into Tigray from Amhara regional state. They have been closed off since before the war started in 2020. So it is not only one route to Tigray, but that has been the route partly accessible during the war, but now it is also blocked for, well, since 15th of December was the last shipment of humanitarian aid to Tigray through the Afar route.
Thank you, Professor Tronvoll. I'd like to bring in Teklai here. Now, Teklai, this isn't the first time the Ethiopian government will be announcing a unilateral ceasefire in northern Tigray. It did on the 28th of June in 2021 after TPLF fighters retook the regional capital, Mekelle. Why didn't that ceasefire hold? Why didn't it lead to a definite peace? And what went wrong? And are you confident things will be different this time around? I know it's just 7 days into the declaration of the unilateral truce.
Thank you. Well, the ceasefire didn't go well because it wasn't meant to be. I think many people forget that the Prime Minister is on record as saying that the official policy when it comes to the Tigray forces, the Tigray Defense Forces, and the Tigray people in general, is to continue the policy of starvation until they give in to the demands of the federal government. On a couple of days after the federal forces were routed out from Tigray, the Prime Minister appeared on TV and said that one of the lessons that his government has learned from the previous regime that had been defeated by the TPLF in 1991, the Derg regime, was that it shouldn't allow aid into Tigray. He said that this is clearly, it's not something that was implied, it's not something that was alluded to or insinuated. He described it in as clear terms as possible by saying that one of the things that his regime had learned from the previous regime was preventing aid from getting to Tigray, so that if the people don't have anything to eat, the rebels, as they call them, wouldn't have anything to eat, and ultimately that would lead to a defeat. So the starvation is an official policy. Now, the ceasefire on the 28th of June was meant to placate the international community because the regime by then was under enormous pressure by the international community to sit in and negotiate and try to resolve the problem politically. And also because it had just been defeated, it is time to think, to reorganize and to regroup and to also plan out what to do next. So the reason that it declared unilateral ceasefire wasn't with the intention of helping Tigrayans, as was kind of on the surface claimed, but to actually impose the blockade that has still sustained, and to also placate the international community by saying the right things in public. So the truce that was declared about 2 weeks ago, and the one that was declared on the 28th of June, in essence, in the spirit, the same. The only thing that varied was the wording. I think now they use indefinite truce, which, if you think about it, is oxymoronic because, number one, the truce is not negotiated with the Tigray Defense Forces, so it can't really be indefinite because what would they do if the Tigray Defense Forces attack? They would have to react, right? So it can't be indefinite truce. So it was a sleight of hand in terms of the wording that they used. But the purpose again now is to buy the time to think, to regroup, and to reinvent and to make arrangements by saying the right things in public and continuing the dirty and cruel policy of starvation. So I think one of the things that surprised me even now is when people who have been following Ethiopian politics for the past 2 years kind of question why it is that aid isn't getting to Tigray. Aid isn't getting into Tigray because the government doesn't want aid to get into Tigray. So nothing of what is happening should come as a surprise to anybody, really.
There's obviously a pattern and a history to it. Thank you, Teklai. Let me get back to Naty. Now, the TPLF agreed to a cessation of hostilities less than 24 hours after the government in Addis declared a unilateral ceasefire, which is a turning point in this 17-month war in northern Ethiopia. Following the government's announcement of an indefinite truce a day earlier, does this set the tone for an end to the 17-month war? Are these signs of a thaw in the conflict? And knowing that the government has a history of not following through with its agreements, it's not the first time that a truce would have been declared. The fact that the TPLF came and said, okay, fine, we respect this agreement, does it make it different from previous agreements? And is this a sign of good things to come?
I don't believe so. I really regret saying that, because Abiy Ahmed and the people who are surrounding him seem to believe that they can rule the country, they can do politics only with PR. And this is just a PR exercise to them. Repeated lies, reneging their repeated promises that they have made. Right now, the international community is getting tired of it. I do believe they're getting tired of it because they have been lied to so many times. Therefore, it's making him not only just to, lack of a better word, a pathological liar, but it also is in danger making the country a pariah state. And I do believe that he's sensing that. Therefore, he probably is trying to use a different tactic, a different language. He is not calling them rebels anymore. He's calling them Tigrayan authorities. So this is a game for him. It's unfortunately, the game that he's playing is with people's lives. Teklai has family. I do have friends. I do have some family members too, who we have not talked to over the phone for over a year. We don't know if they are alive or dead. There is no communication. There's no telecommunication. There is no banking service. There's no financial services. So this is something that he easily can do if this is genuine, but he's not even willing to do that. The government is not doing that. It can look, there are 15 entry points to Tigray, not only just Afar and Amhara. They can find a way to have road transportation, air transportation. They're not willing to do that. The only another point that I want to make that Professor made is, I don't believe that the Amhara regional state and Afar regional state are totally out of control. It does have mechanism of controlling those people. He has a lot of strings that he can pull if he wants to. I think Isaias Afwerki and him in concert, they are just like Teklai said, they're telling him that you can have these people submit to your will by starving them, by killing their youth.
Now, Naty, I would like to take you up on this. If you could get into the head of the Nobel Prize-winning Prime Minister of Ethiopia, including Tigray, what does he want? What's the end game for him? Because millions of people, millions of Ethiopians are starving in northern Tigray. How does he expect this to play out? Does he want complete capitulation of the TPLF? What is his strategy in this war?
It's not, like I told you, it's not only about TPLF, it's about the people of Tigray. He wants to have them submit to his will, to his vision, by starving them. That is, the man says that he claims that he's a religious person. He claims that he speaks to God, and that's something that God probably have told him to do so. We have heard a leaked audio tape of him speaking to his pastor about this ridiculous, not something that you wouldn't believe that you hear in 21st century, that this is his vision. He gets his political direction from invisible God. So I know that you're trying to rationalize that he's a Nobel Prize winner. The Nobel Prize, that's part of the reason of the dilemma of the international community. Made the Nobel Prize worthless. He didn't make peace with Isaias Afwerki. He made a war pact to annihilate people of an entire region. To have two people, the Amhara people and Tigrayan people, they have common ancestors. They have, to the large part, common language, common religion, a common destiny. To have them fight with each other, this is something that Isaias Afwerki said. The Eritrean president Isaias Afwerki said a very, very long time ago to want to happen. So the rationalization of Abiy Ahmed Ali as a normal, sane politician is right now, it should be untenable. It should be something that people need to see outside of the box, that this is a man who is being guided by an invisible God, not even normal God that we all worship, but this is, I wish this audio tape is translated and you guys hear it.
Those are quite serious allegations. Thank you, Naty.
No. It's not an allegation. This is something that's been proven. This is his voice. This is his. A lot of analysts have actually said this. People who have talked to him. One thing, let me add, Pekka Haavisto, who is a Finnish foreign minister who was sent by European Union, in the European Union Parliament said that he was told by Ethiopian authorities that they want to annihilate the people of Tigray. They want to, the professor can tell you about it. He said that he was told that for the next 100 years, they want to make sure that the people of Tigray are broken.
I mean, these are bordering on genocidal statements. I mean, this is it's quite serious. But thank you, Naty. I'd like to bring in Professor Kjetil Tronvoll here. Now, Prof, on May 24, 2018, the United Nations Security Council unanimously passed a resolution condemning the use of food insecurity and starvation as a tactic of war. Now, I'm putting this to you directly. Is the Ethiopian central government and Addis Ababa using starvation as a weapon of war in Tigray?
Yes, there's no doubt about that. And they have used it for as long as the war has been ongoing, so to say. That is absolutely clear. And in no circumstances are food aid supposed to be negotiated to a famine-struck population or a war-struck population, according to international humanitarian law. That is exactly why we got international humanitarian law, to put a distinction between combatants and civilians are supposed to be protected no matter what and should not be used as hostage in a war strategy. We have seen it consistently that food aid has been used as a war strategy by the federal authorities in Ethiopia, and they're following the old script as the Derg and Mengistu Haile Mariam did during the 70s and 80s. Drain the sea to catch the fish, as it is called. It is a proven strategy. It has failed before, and they try it again. So, sadly, I can only say yes, they are doing it.
Now, what's the problem with flying in aid into Tigray? Why are the World Food Programme and a lot of organizations insistent in using trucks and land borders to get much needed supplies to the people of Tigray? Prof?
Well, there are many reasons for it. First of all, you can say it is a cost. It's 25 times more expensive to fly in humanitarian aids at this level than using road transportation. But most of all is because the World Food Programme and the humanitarian agencies are not allowed to fly in a large-scale supplies of humanitarian aid. They have been allowed to fly in very small planes with some key medical supplies for the last week. It's a drop in the ocean. It is not sufficient. And keep in mind, it is about 6 million people now starving in Tigray. You should have an air bridge of unparalleled dimension in order to cater for food supplies at the sufficient level to reach the total population of Tigray. So you need to get access on the ground. And it's not only Ethiopia. Asmara, Eritrea, using the port of Massawa in the Red Sea and transport into Tigray will take not even a day on the road. Of course, President Isaias Afwerki is also blocking aid through his country in order to starve his enemy in Tigray. So Tigray is surrounded by enemies, and they all are blocking humanitarian access to the famine-struck population.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad you mentioned President Isaias Afwerki, the president of Eritrea. Teklai, why is Eritrea aligned with Addis Ababa? Why is Asmara aligned with Addis? What's in it for them, and why are they supporting the Ethiopian central government in this war against Tigray?
Well, it's purely a marriage of convenience, as many people have described it.
I mean, these are, sorry to butt in there, these are parties that were enemies just a few years ago, and now they're best of buddies in fighting Tigray.
Yeah, so the main reason is the TPLF was the kind of the dominant party in 1998 to 2000 when Ethiopia and Eritrea went into war, and then Ethiopia had humiliated Eritrea. So there is a personal grudge that came from that against the TPLF that Isaias Afwerki continues to hold. So this was a perfect opportunity for him to exact vendetta against the TPLF by allying with Abiy and with the Amharas and with the other forces in Ethiopia. But there is also a fundamental reason as to why Isaias wanted to ally with Abiy today. And that is, they have what they call in Eritrea, in Asmara, they have what they call a policy of achieving equality with Tigray by subtraction. So they know that they couldn't kind of build and achieve the kind of development that Tigray has managed to achieve over the last 30 years, because Eritrea essentially is a prison state. It's a pariah state.
I mean, it's referred to as the North Korea of Africa. Yes.
Exactly. So one of the policy that they thought would make them equal with the Tigrayans, with their neighbors, with their kind of mortal enemies, is if they went to Tigray and devastated it, and if they kind of took it back to the Stone Age, as they have described it lately, then they would use it to kind of tell Eritreans that, look, we are better off, the Tigrayans are worse off, so we have the best system. It's our system that has proven to be correct rather than the Tigrayans. So there is that fundamental reason, an opportunity to destroy Tigray, to prove to Eritreans that the Eritrean regime has been doing the right thing for the past 30 years. You couple that with the opportunity to exact personal vendetta against the TPLF, and you find the perfect reason why Isaias wanted to ally with and align with the Abiy regime.
Okay, thank you, Teklai. We'll go on a quick break now, and when we return, we'll be looking at the effects of this devastating 17-month war in Tigray and try to prefer solutions into ending this conflict. You're watching Secure the Continent here on News Central Television. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining, this is Secure the Continent. We've been discussing the declaration of truce in Ethiopia. Will this lead to the end of the conflict? And I still have with me here Professor Kjetil, Tronvoll, Teklai Gebremichael, and Naty, Yifru. Now, I would like to come to you, Naty. Last year, let's start looking at ways to end the solution and if there's any way at all. Now, last year, prisoners, including members of the Tigray People's Liberation Front, in a bid to promote national dialogue, were freed, and Amhara politician Eskender Nega, one of several leading government opponents rounded up after deadly protests erupted in 2020, was free. And now the government in Addis Ababa has declared a truce. Has the TPLF reciprocated these overtures by the government in any way? What concessions are the TPLF given?
Well, first of all, the TPLF TDF is not in a position to give any concessions. They don't have prisoners that they held. They don't have much power in the rest of Ethiopia to give any concessions. Having said that, let's talk about political prisoners. In Ethiopia, they round up regular Tigrayans, people who live normal lives in the rest of Ethiopia. They round them up, they put them in concentration camps, and they show them that, look at, these are our POWs. I can't imagine any more human rights abuses than this. At the same time, whereas the Tigrayan government, they have thousands of POWs, and they just treat them as POWs should be treated. And this is one of the comparisons that I can give you. You say that there are certain political prisoners that have been released. Yes, that's true. That's a good thing. But most of the political prisoners that have been released, many of them were retired TPLF leaders who have not been, who should not have been in prison to begin with. They're retired. They have absolutely nothing to do with the current TPLF. They just held them because they were famous. That was it. Eskender Nega is critic of the government. At the same time, is a very fervent supporter of this war. So releasing him actually is probably will galvanize the base. Yeah. Who support this war for them to gain even more support. So what I'm trying to tell you is every change that they said that they have done is cosmetic. It's not serious. It's not sincere, and that's the problem.
So it doesn't go far enough. You think it's tokenistic? Yeah.
Exactly. It's not. They are very, very, very convinced that they can go on with these kinds of PR move forever. And the good thing is, it looks like that the international community is waking up to that. They're saying that just show me the beef, as we say here in the United States. Where's the beef? I mean, show us some concrete. I have seen several statements and tweets from U.S. congressmen and senators that they're saying that, okay, you say that, but show us the beef, the concrete evidence that you are actually moving towards peace and reconciliation. There is no financial services, like I said. There's no telecommunication, and there is no road or air transport. That's something that they can do very, very easily. All they have to do is turning that on from Addis, so at least families can connect with each other. Families can talk to each other. So we can send the money. Those of us who live outside, we can send the money to our relatives. That could be a gesture, but okay. I don't believe them.
Thank you, Naty. And I'm glad you mentioned the international community. I'd like to bring in Professor Tronvoll here. Some of the atrocities we've heard should not be taking place in 21st century modern day Africa. Is the international community failing Africa? Is the international community failing to do something about this war in Ethiopia? The United Nations has approved an independent investigation into alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity, but the Ethiopian central government says it won't cooperate. Why are international efforts to stop this war failing? And are these atrocities and reports that we're getting, are they not gruesome enough to prick the conscience of the United Nations Security Council and the African Union leadership?
Well, there was a lot of issues packed into that broad question. Let me try to unpack some of it. First of all, the federal government of Ethiopia has employed a very smart strategy from day one to cut telecommunication, to cut internet, and to restrict any international reporter and journalist to access Tigray and to access the field of atrocities. And in today's world, if it is not on television, we don't care. You see how the Ukraine war is covered by all international media 24/7. Of course, that forces politicians and the UN to act very differently than the Ethiopian war, because we don't see it. And if you don't see it, well, we don't believe it. So it's a very smart strategy by the Ethiopian government to ban any international reporter and TV crew to enter Tigray from day one. That's one of the issues. But it is a failure on many levels why the international community, as you say, don't act enough. First of all, the biggest and first failure is the African Union. This is their home turf. African Union is very proud to proclaim that we need African solutions to African problems. Well, where is the African solution to the devastating civil war in Ethiopia, you may ask? So far, African Union has failed utterly in its job to protect its citizens on the continent from the atrocities unveiling in Ethiopia. But yes, also the UN has failed. UN agencies on the ground has failed, but certainly so the Security Council too. And the Security Council is, as always, on these kind of wars and atrocities, divided between the autocratic, dictatorial members of the Security Council, China and Russia, and the Western or the more liberal democratic states in the Security Council, which have wanted to push much harder and also have sought to table a resolution in the Security Council, but which have been stopped and blocked by China and Russia. And the African member states in the Security Council has also not played the constructive role here as they should have done, in my view. And again, it is the issue that this is a so-called a domestic affair, and we should be very careful to intervene into the prerogatives then, as it is seen by the Ethiopian government. And must add also, the Ethiopian government has played it very skillfully, as Naty and Teklai also have outlined, the way the diplomacy has been done here, kind of on and off, promising something, never fulfilling it. And the interest then for an active, very strongly engaged international diplomacy have been hampered by that strategy. The only state which have played a bit tough is the US, at least in the first part of Biden's administration. But since November, also the US administration has backed off a bit and not leveraged the pressure needed on Abiy Ahmed and his government.
Thank you, Professor Tronvoll. I'd like to bring in Teklai here. The United Nations has called it the world's worst hunger crisis. The World Food Programme says it's one of the biggest humanitarian disasters in the last decade. What are some of the humanitarian consequences of this war in Tigray, especially for the people living in that region?
Well, I think the first thing that must be said is about 500,000 people have already perished from either starvation or as a direct result of the war. So that's already a significant consequence of the war in terms of the amount of casualty. 500,000 is unprecedented by any measure. So this is the first thing. And the second thing is everything in Tigray, infrastructure, schools, hospitals, roads, and everything has been totally destroyed. And all means of livelihood in Tigray, farming and other means of livelihood have totally been destroyed, because one of the intention with which the Eritrean troops acted in Tigray was to destroy every means of life in Tigray, so that Tigray would truly be sent back to the previous centuries. So even if the war was to magically end tomorrow, and that's not happening, as Professor Kjetil and Naty was saying, but even if we were to presume that the war would end tomorrow, and if Tigrayans had been kind of left with their own devices as of tomorrow, there is only so much that they would be able to do, because they have been denied of the means of livelihood in Tigray. So it's a total, thorough, and total annihilation of Tigray in every sense of the word. So you could use any metric of measuring destruction, of annihilation, or anything. And what you find in Tigray is unprecedented on every level. But again, I emphasize the main point that I would repeat and I would mention is the fact that 500,000 people have already died, and there is no telling how many people might die if the status quo continues, and we don't have any reason to believe that the status quo is about to change anytime soon, because like we said, the truce is a trick that the regime is playing to placate the international community, but there is every reason to believe that the blockade will continue, and judging by the events of the past couple of days, it looks like troops are massing around Tigray, Eritrean and Ethiopian troops. So it's reasonable to predict that there would be a renewed offensive by the Ethiopian regime. And if that happened, and it's likely that that's happening, then you could expect as much casualty and destruction in Tigray. So it's a really, really horrific situation that we're talking about.
So this truce is just Stalingrad tactics by Addis Ababa to buy time and re-strategize. You don't see any peace coming out of it?
I don't. But if you would give me one more minute, I would just want to emphasize one point, interesting point that Kjetil raised. Exactly. Yeah. So there were two events, one from Ethiopia and another from Ukraine over the past 1 week, that really highlighted the difference in terms of how the international community has approached the two situations. I think it was about 4 days ago when the Russian army said that they were retreating from Kiev, and when they made that announcement, the reaction from the US, from the UN, and from literally everybody was to be skeptic, to say, we don't trust you until we see you retreat. So they didn't buy the words, even though Putin is much, much trustworthy than Abiy Ahmed. But when Abiy says something that they know to be blatant lie, like when he declared the unilateral ceasefire, instead of skepticism, and instead of waiting to see the result, the default position of the international community is to run away with the stories, with the lie that Abiy tells them, because they want an excuse to continue to support him, because he is a person and his regime is a system that they want to rescue, that they want to salvage. So there's a fundamental difference in terms of how the international community have approached the Ethiopian situation and the Ukrainian situation. Although, like Kjetil said, there is one key difference in that the Ethiopian situation on the surface is an internal matter. So there is that hindrance, whereas the Ukraine-Russia situation is a fight or a war between two sovereign countries. So it makes intervention and making statements relatively easier, but there is a difference in terms of how they approached it.
Now, Naty, let's talk about some of the ongoing diplomacy and peace processes. There's been several different initiatives. The one by Nigeria's former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, who is the African Union Special Envoy. Kenya has also been having some quiet diplomacy, and there's obviously the efforts of the United States on the Special Envoy, Jeffrey Feltman. Where do you think this certain new twist of declaring a unilateral ceasefire puts those various initiatives. Are you hopeful that something positive can come out of it?
No, not really, because there are certain difficulties with both President Obasanjo and with President Kenyatta. The way he communicates, the Prime Minister communicates with them is totally different than the way he communicates European
US envoys.
European envoy. For example, President Obasanjo he tried shuttle diplomacy between Addis and Mekelle, and every time he goes to Mekelle, he speaks to the Tigrayan leaders, and he probably gets some promising news. And when he comes back to Addis, what follows him is a drone to attack people, presumably to.
Now, just before we wrap things up, my question to you, Professor Tronvoll, is how does this end? Are there any prospects for peace, and can the civilians caught in the middle get some relief?
I think it needs a much more comprehensive approach to the situation. And keep in mind, this is not only one war in Ethiopia. There are at least 4 major civil wars fought at the same time. The Addis Mekelle is one. You have Asmara Mekelle, another one. And you have the Amhara territorial claims on Tigray as the third one. And then you have the ongoing insurgency in Oromia with the OLA versus Addis Ababa. It's an extremely complex conflict scenario in the country. And it needs a much more comprehensive, much more nuanced, much more resources put into the peace negotiation team, so to say. Okay. Obasanjo is one person with a couple of staffers. That's it. It is way under-resourced and under-prioritized by AU and the international community.
Thank you, Prof. Please, Teklai, if you could do this in less than 30 seconds, I appreciate, because we're fast running out of time. What are your final thoughts, and what will it take to end this conflict?
I think Kjetil mentioned the things that need to be done. So let me just mention the things that shouldn't be done. I think that's also important. One thing is people in the international community should not trust Abiy. Abiy grew up in this very negative Ethiopian culture of zero sum. So there is no way that anybody in Addis Ababa is thinking in terms of finding a solution that could be win-win for everybody. So that's the first point that I would like to emphasize. And the other is Obasanjo is a messenger of the African Union, but the African Union has become a victim of what you might call commitment fallacy, because they said, following the invasion of Tigray by Eritrean and Ethiopian forces, that it was a constitutional mission that Ethiopia had. So they can't retract. They can't retreat from that position and play a meaningful role now, given that they have already taken a side, and that on the part of Tigray, they don't command any sort of respect. So the African Union has ruled itself out of the conflict in Ethiopia. So those 2 things I think shouldn't be done.
And Naty, your final thoughts, 30 seconds, please.
Sure. My final thoughts is Abiy's political base is shrinking. He can't keep going on with making only lofty speeches and PR move. Right now, this is the time is very ripe for diplomats to actually give him the ultimatum.
Thank you very much, Naty. Thanks for your time and contributions to the program, Professor Kjetil Tronvoll, Teklai Gebremichael, and Naty Yifru. Ethiopia's leaders need to act in a magnanimous, conciliatory, and far-sighted fashion to address all parties' concerns and so improve the country's prospects in time. That means an inclusive national dialogue to address the deep fault lines. Ethiopians have paid a colossal price for this war in terms of human and economic terms. More conflict would only increase the devastation and prolong the pain. To our viewers, I would like to say a very big thank you to you all for being a part of the program. This is where we drop the anchor on today's Secure the Continent. Until next time, I am Gbenga Aborowa.